Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another Cannabis Accounting podcast. Today, I have with me my guest, David Gonzalez, the head of revenue for Sobarish and co founder of Fizzy THC, as well as helping some brands do some interesting stuff. And so, David, I'll kick it over to you to just give yourself the formal introduction,
Thank
and
you.
we'll get into how you got into cannabis after that.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Raymond. So my name's David Gonzalez. I'm the head of revenue at Sobarish, as Raymond mentioned there. Also helped co-found a dissolvable tablet infused with THC, a brand called Fizzy THC. And then, side work. I work with, consult for a handful of brands, handful of retailers, and all things operations, data, finance, marketing, the whole shebang.
Nice, nice. And tell me a little bit about your tech background, just in terms of like what were you doing that made you interested in the kind of the hemp and cannabis space originally and kind of drew you in.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe like 5 years ago, or maybe more than that, I was working in the Shopify ecosystem. So it was a company called Return Logic that was handling basically returns, reverse logistics, etc. And I got a chance to work with a bunch of Shopify brands in the ecosystem. And one day, I remember this like clockwork. I noticed there was a brand selling THC products online, and I was like,
Hmm.
how is this legal? Like, how are you guys doing this? So I had a conversation. This is the first time I learned about the whole, Farm Bill in 2018, because prior to this, my whole life was tech and startups for probably like 7 or 8 years. And so as somebody who was a fan of cannabis, but lived in a state that didn't have any legalized cannabis, it's kind of an afterthought. And so to see these companies doing some serious revenue online and realizing they could ship across state lines, they could acquire customers on not normal, but things like Meta, like Google, these
Mhm.
channels that other people have at their disposal. That's really caught my attention about it. And so I started to learn more about the industry, and it was actually right around the same time where Minnesota inadvertently passed legislation that allowed for THC to be in food and beverage. I think this was around 2022. And so, with all that, I remember going out to a brewery one day, I think it was Ben Brewery, and I was looking at the menu and I saw THC on there, and I was like, what the
Hmm.
hell? So, these are both happening around the same time. And I'm like, am
Yeah.
I just out of the loop? Am I this old already? I'm still like in my late 20s, but so I order one of these drinks and they're like, okay, you can't consume it here, but you can take it to go. And I was like, okay. But I tried the drink and I was like, wow, okay. So first of all, it's a different high. It's not like smoking where it's, straight to the dome and you're sitting there pretty messed up. But to sip on one of these 10 milligram beverages, I was like, I probably won't feel this. It's probably like another CBD drink or my body might tingle, but I'm not gonna psychoactively feel this. But I remember sitting there, I went home and I tried it and I was like, wow, first of all, that kicked in quick. It's maybe 10 minutes or so because obviously this is water soluble versus, lipid soluble. So it was going through your blood
Mhm.
faster. So onset time is, 10, 15 minutes. And so I was like, oh, and on top of that, I was like, okay, I definitely have a psychoactive feedback loop. I know it's working. So this is already an improvement from CBD drinks. And then I was sitting there and I was like, but I haven't like lost my mind. Like I can still talk and go socialize and have a good time. And from there, just like my curiosity got piqued. And really what actually was the big impetus for Fizzy THC was I had a buddy of mine who's a manufacturer in the nutraceutical space. And he was like, hey, what do you know about all these like new THC products coming out? And I was like, I'm really just learning about it. And it seems really interesting. And it's like I'm starting to get a bunch of inbound inquiries about people who want like stick packs or who want other kinds of additives and
Bigger
things like
forms or
that.
SKUs.
Yeah, so things like making like a stevia or lemonade because he's
Yep.
making, powders, right, that go into capsules or yep, exactly. And we were sitting there talking and we are like, these drinks are it's cool.
Hmm.
It's awesome. I was like, wouldn't it be awesome if we could just, make any drink a THC drink? And there's tinctures, other things out there,
Yeah.
big packs, but one of the things we thought about a lot too is the whole portability aspect. So it's tough to, I don't have a purse. So I personally can't like put a tincture in my pocket and go to a Vikings game. But with the tablet as the form factor, I was like, okay, I can like put these on a keychain and bring these with me wherever. And so whether or not US Bank Stadium wants to sell THC beverages or not is irrelevant because I can just waltz in there, make my own drink, drink in my own way. And so I honestly, I probably haven't, I'll have a beer every once in a while, but I haven't drank for probably 5, 6 years. And a lot of that is because there's different form factors.
There's other ways to socialize now, and it
Yeah.
makes sense too when you take a step back. It's like, how is an NFL stadium going to get upset when they're just shelling beers and alcohol to people, like tens of thousands of people? A few people want to do cannabis beverages. Like now, you're going to get on your high horse. Like
Sure.
that's a bit hypocritical. I think they're going to start coming around, but that is very interesting. Like epiphany of like it works. I didn't lose my mind. It was enjoyable, which is really
Yeah.
the goal of socializing. And then being able to bring it in public with the used form of, dissolvable tablets,
Yeah.
very logical to me.
Yeah, and that did parlay into basically the a lot more opportunities and just again curiosity, meeting people. But I'll always remember this. I went to a Vikings game and I got a beer on purpose, and I put the tablet in a beer just to show like, okay, I have this freedom to do so because of this form factor. And if the NFL came calling, they'd probably have a pretty good suit against me. But in general, it was showcasing to people like the freedom of being able to have a beverage like this wherever you want, really seemed to resonate. But beyond that, my next challenge was again, I came from software and I got to work with a lot of e-commerce operators and entrepreneurs, but it's one thing to talk through their problems and challenges from a software side as opposed to living and breathing and actually doing those things. So that was the next kind of big challenge for me. It was okay, you launched a product now. How do you actually scale this thing and how do you do it profitably? And so they don't really have a school for or a degree for operations. Maybe they do. They didn't at Boston University, and it's not like a
No, I know what you mean. Yeah, it's all the stuff you learn. It's like what's one thing to like help a client, but then you have your own product or service and you're bringing it to market, which I guess kind of what was something that you learned in that process that it was impactful, or just something that you didn't think you would learn that you're like, okay, I thought about this was going to be hard, but this was something I didn't plan for.
yeah. Some of the biggest challenges again were like I don't have an MBA. I don't have a finance background. So I was one of those people when you're first starting off, you're getting sales and you're like, this is awesome. It's like the super intoxicating feeling. You're getting Shopify orders. You're like, all right, let's ramp up the ad spend. Let's keep doing this. And so anybody who's obviously hasn't had that background understands, okay, you have to know your customer acquisition costs, where your break even is. You have to know how to read all your financial statements, the imports of inventory, all these things. I went in very starry-eyed and I'd say a little bit naive because I was so used to software. But software versus selling a physical product and having it be
Yeah.
an omni-channel type thing where you're selling to retailers. So you're doing direct store distribution, you're working with distributors, and you're coupling that with the complexity of selling online. And again, it's not just like the normal selling online. I can't just whip up a store and hit go on my ads. There's like a whole art and science around how to actually advertise cannabis products. So
Yeah.
figuring out like, okay, I'll make my dummy accounts on social media. So in case one gets burned from the algorithm not liking my posts, I don't lose everything I've built. And from there, I have to make my subdomain or secondary domain that looks like my website, but it's not my website. So when somebody clicks on that, the Google bots or Meta bots don't know that it's THC, but I still have to convey to the shopper that it is an intoxicating product. So I'm kind of making them read between the lines. And then once
Yep.
they're interested enough, they hit buy, and then they actually go to my website. And so I knew from like a tech perspective, I'm like, man, attribution for something like this is going to be an absolute nightmare because
Yeah.
the routes that people take, like buying is not
It
a
feels sketchier the more I go.
yeah, exactly. And so I'm having to learn all of this because like I'm used to working with like apparel companies where you can just sync your Shopify site right to Meta. There's a catalog right then. It's all very clean and easy. But for cannabis, you have to get into this weird I don't know, again, like kind of a pseudoscience where you're trying to figure out like how far can I push this what can I say? What can't I say? How do I,
Mhm.
A, then educate this market on what these products are because it's also like this new thing. People don't know that you can buy THC online. So all these things are happening simultaneously. But
Yeah.
one of the things that helped me a lot was I also partnered up at the time. I had a couple buddies from high school who had recently, maybe 2 or 3 years in, and started a hemp dispensary that had two stores. And so I started meeting with them saying like, hey, I got a new brand, new product. You guys have stores, customers, like how can we work together and accelerate both of our learning curves here? And so I basically started working with them, consulting on how to make their shop an omni-channel shop. It was, I think, two locations at the time, brick and mortar. I think right when I came on full time, we're opening up a third one. I think there's a fourth one now, but we really had to activate the reason for all this too was in Minnesota, if you go look at a map now and you see all the places where you can buy hemp-derived products, it's like chicken pox on that map. There's maybe 5,000 points of distribution.
Yeah.
So for Hemp House, as they're looking at this, it's like, man, if we just have our two stores, like how are we going to compete with a liquor store, a gas station, Ace Hardware? Like, why are they selling THC products? But they are. And so the way that we found a little bit of a moat was to say, okay, how are people finding these products? They're probably not just randomly walking in. There's probably a search that happens somewhere further upstream. So if we can start to dominate the online side of things, showing up first in, rank SEO rankings, if we have ads for top of mind, and we make it as easy as possible to order and find these products, like we'll be able to withstand how much retail competition there is. And so I got to take a lot of my Shopify learnings from working in software, apply it to not just my brand, but like a retail company. And then from there, so if you're selling other people's products, then all of a sudden you get to meet all these other brands, you meet distributors, you're working on co-marketing with them, you're buying their product, you're investing in them. So I think one of the big challenges for people today, a lot of brands is like you drop product off the distributor, and a lot of people think like, okay, job's done. But like that's not at all. You really have to help on the sell through side of things. And so what we actively did at the time was we started working directly with these brands and saying like, tell me who your shopper is because it's flooded with product. There's new brands, new SKUs that pop up every single day. And because of that, there's this endemic of shoppers who are promiscuous. They want something new. There's a new bag, a new logo, a new brand, whatever. And so trying to get brand equity, which is what every brand wants, is notoriously difficult because that barrier to entry is just so low. And so we really started to think through this a bit, which was like, how do we help push to the right segments for the right kinds of products based off the brands that we are holding inventory for? And so with all that, it opened up a lot of doors, got to meet a lot of fantastic operators in the space, a lot of drink companies. I think at one point, I don't know what it is today, but at one point it was the largest retailer of THC drinks, like the largest selection, I want to say in the country for a time. Obviously, there are pros and cons to that. Um,
Yeah.
but really also opened up kind of the next floodgates for us too was we realized that access was a big winning element in all this. And so we had first party delivery at the time. So you had your option, you could get it shipped 2 days, you could come into the store, could buy online, pick up in store. And then I was actually down in Miami at a conference, and I was talking to a chief investment officer, and he was talking about DoorDash, and his wife worked there. And I kind of went up to him, and I was like, "Hey, do you know that liquor stores are able to sell THC products on DoorDash right now?" And he was like, "What do you mean?" And so I pulled it up and showed him, I'm like, "Look at this catalog. Liquor stores can now sell THC products. They were already on DoorDash, so all they did was add products to their catalog, and then all of a sudden, DoorDash is a new channel for them." So we started talking too, and I was like, there's a lot of hemp companies and retailers who could benefit, and I imagine the consumer demand would be very real for products like this. So about a month later, helped DoorDash stand up their hemp merchant account type and became the first ever hemp retailer on DoorDash. And like that first month, I think it added like 10 to 15% to our top line. There was thousands of orders just from like this first month. And that's the big theme that really stuck out to me in all this was this is something new. This is something that's being morphed in real time. It's a wild, wild west. There's going to be maturity and things that happen with this marketplace, but there's a lot of opportunity to just try things. And
Yeah.
when you get to try things as an entrepreneur, as an operator, that's really how you learn because, yeah, you can go to school, get an MBA, you can do all these things, but like there's a reason why you talk to venture capitalists who come from a Stanford MBA, worked at McKinsey, and they're sitting there trying to like give you advice on how to run a company and they really have no idea what they're talking about because they've never actually done it before. And it's those people who have actually gone in, failed a lot, learned a lot, seen all the horrible things that happen to entrepreneurs and operators who try to bring something from 0 to 1. That advice sticks with you for the rest of your career. And so I think this was like a perfect petri dish of all those things happening where you get to learn about entrepreneurship, you get to learn about this burgeoning industry and yeah, that really opened up my eyes to what it's like to actually, be at the front of a new category, a new marketplace, first really establishing itself. And so where it was at a few years ago versus where it's at today, it's markedly different. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of the lessons that we learned early are still definitely things that brands, operators, retailers all could still, definitely learn from today.
No, for sure, for sure. Because I feel like it's, if anything, it's accelerating the acceptance of it. And there's obviously, with no growth is perfect. There's always growing pains. And I mean, I was talking with somebody earlier today. It's like the stat of business is hard. The
Yeah.
majority of them go out of business in the first 5 years, and the remainder of them are out of business within the remaining or never sell. So
Mhm.
it's tough, but it is growing. And so I find it very exciting, where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
this is unique. Because I remember I'm like old enough to remember like the when taps when I was a kid, they were like 5 taps, and they were like the big, huge beer companies, and then there was the craft beer boom. I lived in Denver, Colorado, where it was, there was an old firehouse. It was becoming a craft brewery, and then so kind of lived through that. Then like the alcoholic seltzers, like I remember when there was no seltzers, and then there was like White Claw sponsorships on large national television, and I was so
Yeah.
confused. And so
Mhm.
I kind of just see this as like the third wave that I'm living through. I'm like, yeah, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But I see it on the tail, like there's such a overlap with the health and wellness industry. Like that's also becoming much more mainstream. People are talking about their health. People are trying to be fit. Like it's much more
Yeah.
mainstream. And I feel like the beverage category is kind of unique where it fits right into that lifestyle, so to speak. But which kind of brings me to my question about the data. Obviously you've done a lot of stuff
Yeah.
on e-commerce on the tech side, so you respect the data and just the where can we get the data from and what can we learn from it, more importantly. So kind of from
Yeah.
that perspective, having seen different data pools, what would you say the industry is dealing with? Like what are some opportunities that the industry could exploit, and what are some problems or areas that the industry should be considerate of given the data?
Yeah, it's a good question. The first thing I would do is take a step back and recognize that because of the infrastructure and the different places you can sell at retail, and because of the ability to sell online, it's a massive, massive data fragmentation problem that a lot of people are actively looking to work on and solve. And so I remember the early days. Maybe like 2023, which is getting only a couple years ago. But I was like talking to Bloomberg
Hey, time
reporter.
flies in this industry. Everybody says it's
Yeah.
like dog years.
Exactly. But I remember talking to so many people, and the number one question everybody had was like, how big is this market? And to me, I'm like, well, I know what we're pumping out. And I was like, if we inferred the average person or average company is doing that, then it's pretty big. Um, But then you start to get more methodical on kind of data collection. You want to look at like consumption per capita, things like that. So I'd say
Mhm.
the hardest thing about the data problem today is just the few axioms that exist, meaning how do I know that this is a true number? Where can I go to verify that this isn't somebody who did a model that was way too aggressive or maybe under aggressive? So I see stuff, there's like headset, there's like Brightfield, there's a bunch of,
ESA, yeah, there's
yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of them.
We try to put data out. There's Nielsen data, there's Spins data, distributor data, all this stuff. But the big complexity in all this is because of the uniqueness of points of distribution. If you think about it, you have alcohol POS systems. So that's probably going to be your VIP and Compass type data, maybe Nielsen. You have grocery stores, you have smoke shops, you have C stores, you have again, hemp dispensaries. And again, like I said, literally like Ace Hardware is selling THC products. So first of all, how do you get all these people to opt in to share any of that data, which is a challenge in of itself. So where I
Mhm.
normally look to kind of get an axiom to figure out, okay, how big is this market? Tax data is normally one place you can look, but you probably see this a lot. Uh, Taxes and cannabis don't always go hand in hand, meaning there's a lot of people who don't know exactly how they should be reporting their figures, either underreporting or whatever the case may be, not even knowing there's a cannabis tax, even though they sell cannabis products.
Yeah, yeah, like not like out of criminally, they're just this shit's complex.
Yeah, exactly. And so um, that's what makes it challenge. You can start to infer and you can find bits and pieces of information. The nice part about the position I find myself in is I get a chance to not just look at some of the macro numbers, but once you look at enough individual companies as well, you start to see themes that happen a lot. And so you asked about, I guess, maybe challenges and
Yeah, or trends that you're seeing.
opportunities. Yeah. Challenges, I would say, is that a lot of people who get in beverage or who got into beverage early might be really good marketers. They might know cannabis really well. They might be brewers, whatever the case may be. But
Hmm.
um, I think the biggest thing that I noticed was a lot of people don't take the time to really dive into their own data. So, let alone this macro stuff we're talking about, there is a bit of a neglect on one's own data and where that leads you. And I think another thing that happens, which you can probably attest to, is oftentimes I see operators who maybe don't have a finance background. And what they'll do is they might be, pushing some sales, but they're basically just outsourcing this to an accountant and saying, like, can you just take care of all this? And like when you sign on with an accounting group, like the accountant is making you sign that they're not liable for any shit before they dig in. So if you don't know what to ask and the conversations to have, there's only so much an accountant can do for you. And so a lot of times what I see is just a lack of hygiene around people's books. And so that shows up. So again, like now we're starting to mature as an industry. People are raising capital. They're looking at mergers and acquisitions, looking to maybe cash out of hemp and try and get into, marijuana, which is coming online for Minnesota. But a lot of people who are trying to sell their hemp companies fundamentally have no idea how to value their companies because they're going, "Hey, we made $1 million last year," and you're like, "No, you did not. You did 1 million in sales." And so having to sit down with them and go through their balance sheets, understanding the historical context, reviewing their P&Ls with them, understanding how cash flows in and out. And then unfortunately, a lot of times you have these conversations and you're kind of sitting there being like, this company that you're sitting on is not as valuable as you're thinking it might be. So there's not necessarily this like glorious exit you'll have one day and again, this capital market from like an investor perspective, so many investors have been burned on cannabis investing or CBD investing in the past too. There's like
Yeah.
trauma from years ago. And so they're looking at financials and scrutinizing the hell out of everything now. And so, but on top of that, there's also a scarcity of capital injected into this marketplace either. So there's only so many people who would write you a check, and you have so many brands competing over that check. And so I think a lot of brands, just because that barrier to entry is so low, they'll launch a beverage, they'll think they'll be the next Red Bull. But I mean, like, as you grow and scale and as there's more competition and this gets commoditized, one day you will also have to compete against the top of the top, because if the opportunity gets big enough, then it's a no-brainer for these massive publicly traded companies to come in and say, if the opportunity is right and all these little brands subsidized all the risk and educated the entire market, you can bet your ass they're going to come in and leverage their infrastructure, their relationships, come in, get shelf placement, and all these brands who are very excited about this gold rush, then all of a sudden are going to feel that pain. But conversely, the other thing I'll say, that's the doom and gloom side.
Yeah.
Conversely, the opportunity side, what I what is very encouraging to me is, when you look at a balance sheet, there are places where you can massage the numbers a bit to make everything balance out, right?
Hit your numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, you can make your inventory value look higher than it might be. You could value it as your retail price instead of your cost of goods, because anything that's touching a bank account that's got a chain of custody, you can go back and verify that stuff pretty easily. But um, for inventory, it's very unlikely you're going to have people who go do hard counts at all the places where inventory is stored, figure out your purchase orders, figure out like, no, 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 this is your true inventory number. But anyways, um, when I look at balance sheets, though, when I look at P&Ls, the demand is always very prominent. So what I mean by that is it's very rare you see a company whose sales suck, which is encouraging, because as you look
It
at
is
it,
encouraging.
like, okay, maybe your the brand may or not be set up or structured enough to have the attrition or the operational excellence to scale, but you can't deny that consumers are buying these products. And so that to me is really interesting. And the other big opportunity that I see a lot too is is that brand promiscuousness, meaning so far there are a few brands who have started to build some brand equity, but for the most part, there is no Red Bull, there is no Coca-Cola of THC beverages. There are
Yeah.
some very big, beautiful brands out there that have done a great job of creating a brand, but from a pure brand equity perspective, if you're walking into Total Wine and you see all these options and there's hundreds, thousands of SKUs, there's not like one winner take all. And so when I think about that, that's interesting too, because it suggests that there may be room for maybe 10 to 15 brands to really scale up and take market share. And then the other part that's really, I guess, encouraging from an opportunity perspective too is there's so much innovation happening at the product level, meaning at first it was just seltzers, straight THC, and that was cool. Now you have all these minor cannabinoids that are in there. You have adaptogens, functional mushrooms, probiotics, prebiotics. And so there's people are basically making segments within the segment as well, which to me is really exciting.
Yeah. Sure.
And you even have some brands who are kind of hedging their risk by saying, okay, we'll make this version infused and this one non-infused. So it's the same exact product. You just take out the psychoactive ingredient. Now all of a sudden you can push it in Walmart, you can push it in Sprouts, all these things. So to me, conceptually, that's a fascinating moment in time, because for so long, alcohol has been this predominant player in how we drink beverages. Like if you go out and socialize,
Yeah, like how you socialize in general. It was like cigarettes, like my uncle's generations, like they all
right?
smoked darts and drank beer, and then people still drink. So it's like everybody is just used to go back to like Roman time. They drank wine.
Exactly. It's the most accessible form factor. So what's really interesting is this is like the first time in maybe 100 years that alcohol is that the predominant player is now somewhat being challenged by basically not just one category, but a bunch of other ones, non-alcoholic, functional, cannabis drinks. People are just looking for something that gives them that, again, that positive feedback loop, something that makes them feel good, but they don't want to sacrifice tomorrow, their health, years off their life, etc. And a lot of people still do things like zebra stripe, where they'll go back and forth between having an alcoholic drink or depending on the occasion, the session, whatever. And so to me, it's a really exciting time, and I'm curious to see how this all kind of shakes out. And if you do, study marketplaces, there's always the same cycles that really happen. You have your wild, wild west to start. It's again like
Yeah.
that gold rush. Everybody jumps in, goes for it. Over time, inevitably, regulation happens. We're starting to creep into that phase. You have some states cracking down. You have some uncertainty at the federal level. Over time too, once you make this industry big enough, you obviously draw the eye of big alcohol, you draw the eye of big cannabis. If they see that opportunity and the timing's right, the resources are right, the demand is there, they'll jump in. And then obviously regulatory capture, stuff like that happens. And then at the end of the day, normally it's a monopoly, duopoly, whatever. But it's really interesting to kind of watch this play out in real time and kind of being there from, I don't want to say day zero, but like the very early stages of when THC.
Like being a part of it.
Yeah, just to
Yes.
kind of just live it instead of just like reading about it in a textbook, to see this all play out. It's really fascinating to be like, oh, okay, history actually is a very good teacher. So it's
Oh
funny
yeah.
to see it's shaking up.
Especially if you're like a fan of business or just like history. Like so I still like use the internet. Like I was too young to take advantage of the internet. Like I was like 9 years old, 10 years old when it came around. I'm from
Mhm.
the country. Probably took a few more years than I needed to get out by us, but like it was cool to see these like tech companies, e-commerce, fintech, like all these companies were created on the tail end of the internet that
Yeah,
like we got to live through, and many people who were in their professional careers got to serve these startup companies, startup tech companies. And I
yeah,
feel like that's what I see in cannabis and what kind of gets me pretty excited. It's like, and I think it's because, I mean, you're in Minnesota, so you're going through legalization. I'm in Wisconsin. We don't even have a medical program. So some people think, like, to your point, like where we are on the day one, day zero, it's like in a 9 inning game. I feel like we're like inning two because it's, yes, of course, some markets have been around for a long time. But as far as like people's acceptance of cannabis, like even California has like weed desert, so to speak, where you can't even really get like cannabis accessibly and you got to go to a dispensary. So it's definitely very unique to see like all these companies continue to change, continue to grow, continue to be created. As you pointed out, yes, sales continue to go up, but profit margins are shrinking and unit economics are tightening up, which makes sense. We're coming out of prohibition, so you can't sell a pound for 4 grand anymore. It's like, well,
mhm,
how much did it cost you actually? And then let's do a market. We don't get to worry about just because you risked time in jail price. So it's, and those days are even becoming less and less. Like people don't even talk about legacy days anymore, but it's like people still delineate. It's like, oh, this is regulated cannabis. It's like, no, it's just cannabis at this point. We're in the regulated industry, but it's
right.
it's interesting. And I've been like, and I want to bring this into land here in a little bit, but I guess just for the future of just like kind of just like social consumption in general, like kind of where do you see trends of just like people socializing? Because even in like the cannabis space, there's like lounges now are becoming a thing, and at first people are like there's no way somebody would go to a lounge unless it like they served alcohol. And
Mhm.
now I think people are seeing the writing on the wall of like there will probably be lounges that are pretty much hemp beverage or THC beverage friendly, and everybody's kind of chilling. But I guess just overall, where do you
Yeah.
see the kind of socializing culture going into the future? Why is he excited?
Yeah, this is a nuanced answer, but one of the things that's really striking about this category as well is I would say 95% of sales are probably at retail. But if you look at alcohol, for example, and this might just be Minnesota, I don't know if this is nationwide, but 4 out of 5 sales are on premise. So
What does
out
that
of a
mean?
bar, restaurants, sporting event,
Okay, like
you're having
yeah.
it there on the spot, right? THC has not cracked that yet. And the big reason for that is
Hmm.
primarily insurance purposes. So you are starting to see some dominoes fall. So if you look at Minnesota, there's probably a handful of places now, like breweries you can go to and get a THC drink. There are some restaurants. But as far as like a volume game goes, which is what this whole industry is,
Yeah.
I think we've even really, I would say we're all probably still in the first inning because you're just now starting to hear about concert venues, sporting arenas,
Yeah.
that. So if you think through like when do people actually drink, um, it's not often, I don't know, it depends on where
Yeah,
you
it's
live.
not at home. Now that you said that, it's like, I mean, in Wisconsin, we have a liquor cabinet, but most states, people don't have liquor cabinets. And if you do, you're not drinking it every night, or else it's like, you wouldn't have a job. So,
Well, it's
no, you're
gonna be,
definitely drinking at bars and restaurants the majority of the time, for sure.
yeah, well, it's gonna be delicate because I know Wisconsin has like 10 of the top
I
drunkest
know.
cities in
So
the
I'm like
country.
trying to take myself out of Wisconsin. Luckily, I travel a lot and I live in Mexico for a few months, so I have some outside perspective. But no, that totally makes sense. And I think even like concerts, for sure, like Summerfest,
Yep.
like it's a big concert. They
Yep.
just this year I saw some like THC
Yeah.
beverages, but it was a thing. People were stoked. So it's like just this summer, 2025. But to
Yeah.
your point, we're kind of an outlier too in Wisconsin. We're pretty liberal with our hemp
Sure.
laws, our beverage laws, but so
Yeah.
on-premise is the new unlock for that, though. That hasn't even happened yet, though.
I would say that's to me, if like once that domino falls, and again, there's rumblings coming out, and again, the big limitation is getting insurance to sell these products. Liquor insurance companies might threaten to drop their coverage if you sell THC, but now since the industry is starting to mature, you're starting to see more options, more packages, and so there's been a few big players. I think Cheech and Chong did a big one at like Rolling Loud, which is a massive event.
Yeah.
I saw like Summerfest, which I don't know if that's Wisconsin or
Yeah,
Minnesota.
Summerfest. It's Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
So that had like Nowadays and a few other in Can there as well. But yeah, basically, as these start to proliferate all the places where one would traditionally consume alcohol, to me, that's where the velocity really starts to take off and the acceptance takes off and the whole socializing piece takes off. Another example would be Cycling Frog doing a partnership with I think it's like the Portland Pickles or something like that. It's like a minor league baseball team, but they
Oh, they're
have
cool and
THC
everybody knows
beverage.
about them.
Yeah,
Nice.
so like stuff like that is slowly but surely starting to happen as well. And to me, that's probably the biggest unlock or biggest opportunity. Because if you go look at where alcohol makes its money, it's predominantly the markups from on premise. And so if THC can be as ubiquitous as alcohol and appear not just in dispensaries, not just at retail, but at events, at places where we consume beverages, and it's that fourth category, if it's liquor, beer, wine, and THC or functional wellness, whatever you want to call it.
Non-alcoholic,
Yeah,
functional
that's
enjoyment.
to me, that's exciting. And that's a really big domino that also helps just that acceptance piece. If you see more people out trying it, you're sitting there talking to these people, they're not talking to a wall, they're just a little bit spacey and giggly. Your curiosity might get piqued, you might want to try it and reach for that the next time. So to me, that's a huge, once that piece gets figured out and we start to see that take off, that's when we really start to see the longevity of this industry. And some people are quoting it, beverage being, 2 to 3 billion for THC drinks or hemp-derived THC drinks right now. Alcohol is, a $300 billion marketplace. And so if you start to extrapolate a bit and you say, okay, if these products can live in the alcohol infrastructure and more, and if they can be at gas stations, hemp shops, all these other places, if they're as ubiquitous as all these other drinks, then the pie, so to speak, of how big this category could be starts to look very exciting and really interesting from the outside. But then, yeah, the next question is, of that big pie, who are those players that can last and stand the test of time, who can be well capitalized, who can be capital efficient, who can have good distributor contracts, who know their unit economics really well, who can partner up with the right, joint ventures, whatever it might be. And so that's the part that I'm excited by is there's a world of possibility. But for today, it's very much a battle of attrition. It's who can continue to stay alive because there is consolidation, there is a lot of competition, capital is very scarce, macroeconomy wise, discretionary funds are lower. There's a lot of uncertainty on the macro, so that makes writing investment checks and things like that a little bit more risky than in days past. And so, really, it's whoever can stay on their feet, keep making it, keep growing, scaling profitably, and not just growth at all costs. I think those are the players that have that
Yeah.
ability to kind of not be the last one standing, but uh, have finally have those brands step in and build some brand equity.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. It's kind of that stay alive, not like stay alive, but like stay in the game until you get that inflection point of on-premise sales. Because every category or category within a category, they have natural inflection points of just things that happen. Like vapes weren't that popular 10 years ago. And like they had an inflection point after Juul, where Juul just made everybody used to it. They're like, oh, cool. It's a vape
Mhm.
cartridge, but it's got weed in it. Like, so it's like there's all these natural things that happen. And I think that's an interesting call out. And like, I think it's a good place to end. It's like, still tough. There is this, elephant in the room of you could catch the eye of some of these very old, well capitalized, cashed companies, but there's also just a new unlock with on premises where because how many times have people saw seltzers at the bar and like they were like, well, let me try it, and then their girlfriend tried it, and the next time they went to the store, their girlfriend's like, give me one of those seltzers. Or
Mhm.
guy, sorry, but you know what I
Yeah.
mean. And so it's like you have to try it on premise because you have single use. So it's like, all
Yep.
right, let me do a single use try. Okay, I kind of like it. I'll get a 4 pack when I'm in the store. But when you're in a store, you're not gonna buy four or a 6 pack or 10 pack. So it's a very natural unlock. And then just at the end of the day, like people do move a lot of liquids at concerts. It gets hot. They're moving around. They need to stay hydrated. And
Yep.
so it's a very natural next step. Well, thanks so much for your time, David. Just tell us a little bit about kind of what are you up to the rest of the year? Where can people find you?
Sure.
Anything like that?
Yeah, I'd say my day job, so to speak, two big things are continuing to work on Fizzy. So we have an online shop, Fizzy THC. I think we have about 100 retail stores that we're in as well. But where I spend actually the most of my time these days is a company I'm really excited about. It's called Sobarish.com. It's a
Nice.
THC beverage and non-alcoholic marketplace. It has gummies and other stuff too, but really awesome founder over there named Kim Gomez, who's done this great job of captivating and growing this really fascinating audience of people who are all, not all, but a lot of them are former drinkers or looking for ways to cut back, try something new. And so her story was all about her work with her mom. Her mom had problems with alcohol in the past. They started trying out, reviewing all these products, and then people started eating it up. And so they literally turned that into a business marketplace. And so that's been awesome
Naturally.
to kind of be back working with a bunch of other brands, helping sell their products. So, selling the Breeze, the cans, the cycling frogs, the Winks, the Happies, all your proverbial, big logos that are in the THC space. So it's always fun to work with a lot of these other brand operators out there to try new beverages ourselves and help get them in front of shoppers who thoroughly appreciate and enjoy these. So it's been cool to see getting, a couple thousand orders a month and now getting to past 12,000 per month and growing pretty quickly. So that's where you can find me, either at Fizzy THC or Soberish.com.
Awesome, awesome. Well, if you hear that, if you got a unique beverage looking for a unique audience, reach out to David. He'll help you get it into your ideal audience. Awesome. Thank you so much, David. You have a good day,
Of
my
course.
man. Be
Thank
well.
you.